it's Lisa. Today I'd like to share with you my first ever watercolor sketchbook and do a flip through of the entire book. I started doing some watercolors some time ago, and I started out doing them just for card making, but it's evolved a bit. I'm really enjoying painting. So I wanted to share some of that with you, and you'll see some things that I've done on cards as well as projects that I would like to paint in a larger format as well. This particular sketchbook is from Etcher Labs in the portrait orientation. This is cold press paper, 100% cotton. It's the A5 size, which is kind of the medium size. The pages are 8 inches by 5.5, which is the perfect size for a card maker, as you'll see as we go along. The paper can be painted on both sides. It's almost identical, and it paints up really nicely. The only complaint I have with this product is that the first spread and the last one do not lay flat, but everything else does. So I didn't really use those, and I started here on the second pages. When I did these, I decided to start with something that I felt like I would do a halfway decent job on. I had two concerns about doing a sketchbook and why I had never painted in a sketchbook and had always just painted on loose paper. One of them was that I was going to mess it up, that I was going to paint stuff and I would really hate it and I'd want to rip out the pages even though I shouldn't rip out the pages. So I was a little nervous about that, and so I started with something that I thought I could do pretty easily, and then I went to paint something that I had actually already painted somewhere else before. That's one of the few things in this book that's been painted somewhere else before I painted it in here for the first time. On the screen you'll see the name of the artist and the video if I painted something from a video, or if I just painted it from a photo I found, then I'll just tell you that as we go along. You'll see quite a few references for LeFebvre. I'm one of her patrons on Patreon, and this was a Patreon video. So I had painted the sailboat a couple of times, and then I put it in the sketchbook. One of the things that's really nice about this sketchbook is it's a reference now when I want to do cards for things that I can paint and things I know how to paint, like these daisies. And this was one of the few other things that I had already painted somewhere else before. Something that I knew I wanted to do was to paint some cards with a glass jar on them and a bouquet. So this was the very first glass jar I ever painted. It doesn't have much detail to it, but just to get an idea of how it would go. And then I found another video and started experimenting with a couple of jars with flowers in them that became the model for several cards that I painted. And this is why this size is really great for card maker, because half of one of these pages is about the size of a card front. So you don't necessarily have to paint something that large, but you have that as a guideline. In one of the other videos, I found all of these different wildflowers. Some of them I had never heard of. Waxflower, I didn't know what that was. But I got a way to learn to paint it, especially in a small scale that I could use on my vases. I had just purchased these watercolor pencils from Faber-Castell when shortly before I bought this first sketchbook. And so for this one, I was painting the cosmos with regular watercolors, and then I did one with the pencils to kind of compare how they worked. And I've learned as I've gone through this how I like to work with the pencils. For this video, there's a wet-on-wet technique for trees. This is something I've struggled with. I'm still not that great at it. It gives a really soft appearance, and you'll see some other examples as we go through the book. Now, my friend had given me this flower color guide. You'll see this in a lot of people's watercolor videos. It's a great reference for painting different things, and there's a lot of flowers in here that I would still love to paint. And I used that to paint these peonies. And so there again, there's some things that I like and some things that I felt like I could improve upon and have improved upon as I've gone along. So it's, again, a good reference. We have a lot of bird feeders around here, but we did not have any bird houses. And I had these bird houses, there were 3 of them that my dad had given me as decorative bird houses years ago, and I wasn't using them anymore for decorative purposes inside the house. So I thought, I'm going to let the birds use them, because they were made to be used outdoors. They didn't have to be used decoratively. But I took a photograph of one of them that we put up outside, and I took some liberties with the colors, and then I painted it. And this was another thing I was concerned about with doing a sketchbook. If I paint something I really like, am I not going to want to take it out and use it? Well, I really do like this, but I don't know quite what I would do with it, and so I kind of like having it here as a reference. And the drawback to painting something you really like and having it on loose paper is in my case, I give it away. I'd end up turning it into a card for somebody, and then it would be gone, and I wouldn't have that reference anymore. Now here's an example of one that I did not care for. This is my least favorite page in the entire book, is this butterfly. Not happy with the butterfly, but I painted it. It was just something I saw in a picture, I think, and painted. And, I tried it. That's what the sketchbook's for, is for experimenting. This was done almost entirely, I think, with pencils, and it's one of the flowers out of the flower color guide, these calla lilies, and it became a really nice, delicate thing. I enjoyed doing those. Emma's videos include these flowers where A is for, I think it was amaryllis, and B is for, something else. We were up to F. F is for freesia, and G is for geranium. And I liked this one, and I have made some cards with this. I tried making it on a smaller scale for the cards, and for me that just didn't work. Some flowers work well that way, and I didn't find geraniums to be one of those. So it works better for me if I paint geraniums fairly large and then trim down the papers. That's what I've discovered. Some lilacs, and then I tried painting zinnias from an internet photo. We have zinnias now blooming in our yard, and I've got lots of photos, and I'm going to do some more zinnias and see if I can get a little bit better effort with those. When I painted this particular one of all these little small objects for summer, it was from a video, and I was really interested in this glass of lemonade, and I thought I would put that on cards. What I found was that I really enjoyed painting the hibiscus, so I found another video from another person online whose work I really admire and enjoy watching her videos. And again, the link or the reference will be on the screen. And I love how the leaves came out. You're going to see that as a theme going through this. I really liked the leaves, and I did use this as a model for some cards that I made for summer. Now, if you had asked me whether I would like to paint a bird of paradise, I would have probably told you, nah, that's not going to be a flower that interests me, because we don't grow them here. We're not in a tropical climate. I don't have any references out in my yard or anything or anywhere else around here to see them. I only had the one that was in the video that I watched, but it was a great video, and it was, and I really loved painting. This is one of my favorite things in the entire sketchbook. Not only did I enjoy doing it, but how it came out. And I would like to do this one again, maybe in a larger size and maybe with multiple blooms on it and more foliage. So that's a project that I have that I want to do. The colors would look great in my house. I did this from an internet photo. I'd like to learn how to paint birds, and I had painted one other bird, and it's upstairs in my craft room. And so I gave birds another try, and that's another thing on my list of stuff I want to paint. But I got to practice my shadows and things with this bird on his birdhouse. I didn't think I got my flowers dark enough, but I did like to paint hydrangeas. Now normally from where I paint, I can see my big hydrangea bushes, and I can see all these great leaves, but this year, no bloom. I think I had 6 bloom total, and I've got one more that's about to come out. But we had a late freeze that killed all the bloom, and so normally I would have lots of beautiful hydrangea inspiration here, but not this year. So maybe next year we'll have that. The iris was another letter that we painted. This was a challenge video on using a limited palette, just taking 3 colors and mixing, and my colors were Opera Rose, Hansa Yellow, and Hooker Green. And you can see that I don't have a lot of pink here, even though Opera Rose is a very pink color because of the blending. So that was kind of an interesting challenge. This video from Karen Rice Art is another one of my favorites in the book. And whenever I painted something from somebody's video, I would include the name and the date that they did it. So if I wanted to refer back to it, because this was an older video, it's over 3 years old, and I might not be able to find it again without that date. And then I put the date that I painted it down in the lower right-hand corner of each page. But this is one that I can see, rooms for improvement, but I'd like to do it on a larger scale. I thought that was just a really beautiful scene, and I learned a lot with that one. This, we used salt to create some of the texture. on the page. I say we. I didn't do this as part of a class. It was just a video that I watched. Okay. Another one from the Flower Color Guide, the water lily, and I just sort of randomly picked it one day, really loved painting it. It reminds me a lot of the Bird of Paradise in the way it was painted. And it's again another one of those things that I do see them sometimes, but we don't have them here. We don't have any water to have water lilies. But I very much enjoyed doing that one, and I used my watercolor pencils to do some touch-up work on these. There's a little town close to us called Blowing Rock. It's in the North Carolina mountains, and they have beautiful flowers downtown. And this year especially, I think they've just been gorgeous. I was up there one day. I've started taking a lot more pictures for myself for reference photos. I took pictures of these black-eyed Susans and came home and painted them. So the sketchbook is also kind of a record of things that are happening around here, such as the gladiolas. Gladiolas are my favorite flower. We grow them in many different colors. My husband started growing them for me years ago. I think he got tired of buying me flowers. So he started buying these gladiola bulbs and planting them, and it's been a wonderful gift. And I give them too. I did 10 bouquets and gave out to different people this year of flowers. I always do a few each year, and despite not having any hydrangeas to go with them, we had a lot of glads and some other flowers that I could combine. This one I painted from a real live flower. I had it here on my table, and I just used it to sketch out the blooms and paint them. So that's my first glad, and I'm very, very happy with it, and I'd like to do some more. I'm going to have to do some more in a hurry because they're just about bloomed out for the year. Around this time, I was starting to experiment with line and wash, which for me is more wash and line. I tend to put down the color and then do the drawing over the top of it. And I wanted to see whether that would work well in these sketchbooks because I was getting close to needing to buy more of them, and I knew I wanted to do more of that, and I wanted to see if the paper would work well, and it did. It worked great for those. So I did those. That was from a Pinterest idea. This is very similar to ones that I had done for Christmas cards, except I added the lines this time. I used that technique where you take a glass and you dip it in watercolor and put it on the paper and then add water to kind of blend the colors around. So I just had a lot of fun with that, and I did make some Christmas cards to give away using that as a template. This was another of Emma's videos. It's from a flower from the Flower Color Guide. I just followed her video. I got my magnolias a little bit too purple instead of pink, but I like the arrangement and the way the colors varies from light to dark, the shading. From Diane, Anton Studios, she did these birds, and hers, she just painted them. I added the lines to mine. I thought they made them look better for me, and I just love these little birds. And she shared some techniques about the spacing and things with the eyes and the beaks and all that helped me a lot to make my birds have a little bit of character and personality. And the one, I don't have the small one down here. I did a small one for a card, and they look, they're not quite the same, but they have kind of different expressions in their faces, and I think they're just really fun. I'm sure I'm going to paint more of those. I kind of messed up the sun on this, but it was a kind of a lot of layering to this particular painting. This was Pinterest. I took a lot of liberties with the design. I put down color, and then I did the drawings over the top of it. We're approaching the time of the year when I'm going to be wanting to do some fall cards. So I went out in my yard and I plucked some leaves off my maple tree. They're green, of course, right now. But I laid them down and just drew around the different sized ones. And then I did a wet on wet technique to experiment with the colors for the leaves. And I used a technique I learned in one of Emma's videos where, while it's wet, to take the end of your brush and make marks for your veins. That worked great, but it did leave some impressions on the other side. So this is the one page in here where I just sort of didn't really try to paint anything in particular on that page. Gerber daisies are something that I have in my garden, and I took a photograph of mine and painted them and then experimented with some different leaf shapes and sizes. I keep having to brush my shoulder. I have an ant that keeps trying to crawl on me. All right, now I have to get rid of it. This, I knew this video was coming up with the anemone from the Flower Color Guide. So I knew the video was coming up with this anemone from the Flower Color Guide. So what I did was I painted it first in my style, which is pretty detailed. This took some time to paint. And then I did Emma's video version, which is a looser style. And I like this. I like parts of both of them. This was certainly the faster one to do. And it's interesting to try some different styles and kind of figure out what's going to be your style. Oh, when you first start painting watercolors, you'll see all these videos on painting roses. Roses are like when I was learning to free motion quilt, stippling was my nemesis. Stippling is supposed to be like the easiest thing to do, and I still struggle with getting decent looking stippling. Roses are my stippling. I cannot paint a decent rose. And I felt like after all this time, I bet I could sit down and paint a rose. Guess what? I still can't. I still don't like them. I still do the same mistakes that I've always done where I paint them. I leave too much white space, or I don't leave enough white space. I go back over it to fix it and it doesn't look better. Roses are not my thing. I don't grow roses, so I'm just not going to paint roses. Maybe I'll try again another year or something. I found a photo on the internet of a window, and when I say I find a photo, it's of the real thing. It's not of a drawing or of a watercolor, but I found this really cool window and flower box, and then I did the color, and then I added the lines and stuff over it to create this scene. Two more of the flowers from alphabet letters. J is for Jasmine, K is for King Protea. And this was another good example of why a sketchbook is helpful. I had done something similar to this where I had white flowers and you put the leaves under them so they really show up, but I don't know where that went. I don't have that example anymore, but now I have an example in my book. And then to wrap up the book, I thought I would do a little challenge. My watercolor palette has a large well area in it, and there was a lot of different colors spread out in there. So I thought I'd do a page where I just try to use up some of that paint. And then the last thing I painted is another one of those things. It's sort of a record of what's going on. These are some tomatoes that we are growing out here. My husband has these tomato plants, and we also have a groundhog. And we thought the groundhog was only helping himself to one or two tomatoes. Well, I just painted this a couple of days ago. I took a picture of it, painted it. Today I looked out there shortly before shooting this video, and all four of those tomatoes are gone. So, and he didn't pick them. So the groundhog has helped himself to quite a selection of tomatoes. So that's going to be another issue, I'm afraid. We've had, the groundhog's been hanging around here. We know where his little den is, and he's been around here about 4 years, and we kind of feel like he's almost a pet. He eats the grass and stuff, but this tomato eating may be a problem, so I don't know. But anyway, that's my sketchbook. I appreciate you watching. If you have a favorite, I'd love to hear what you like the best of what I painted. And thanks for joining me today.